Hello there, Terry here with the Animation Industry Podcast. You will want to give today's episode a listen if you're just starting out in stop motion, because I got a very well-known and expert animator to go over exactly what you need to set up a beginner stop motion studio in your bedroom, but while still giving your videos a super professional look. So he is going to go over the specific lights, camera, software equipment, and setup that you need, but that won't break the bank for you either, especially because all this stuff can cost you a lot of money if you don't know what you're looking for. Plus, he is going to give you some of the pro tips and editing hacks that the professional studios use, and he's going to answer some of the most asked questions when it comes to making a short film. But before I get into today's episode, I am really happy to be able to offer you something very special. So the other day I was chatting with my friend Mark Spess, and you might be familiar with his work. He is an amazing claymation animator and sculptor, and I'm actually doing an upcoming episode with him. But he also runs an online store of stop motion materials that he personally builds and also uses in his work. And he's been running this store and shipping out armatures and rigs and everything else you could need to animators all over the world for many years. And he offered to give anyone listening to this episode 10% off whenever they buy any of his bendy armatures, bendy rigs, and Stop Motion Pro software, which are perfect for any beginner or professional animator. So if you've been looking for a really good quality armature to build your puppet with, or do some experimental shots or whatnot, or you need some extra rigs for your project, just go over to his website, animateclay.com, click on the store, and when you check out in the final step, use coupon code AIP as an Animation Industry Podcast, and you will get an instant 10% off your purchase. Plus, you are also supporting this podcast by doing so. So that's animateclay.com, code AIP, and 10% off any of the bendy armatures or rigs and Stop Motion Pro software. And I'll include all this information in the description of this podcast. So that's that. Now on to today's episode. So the animator I mentioned before is Javan Ivey, and he started his path into stop motion at Pratt Institute's animation program, which he graduated from in 2009, and afterwards he moved back to Portland to begin working in stop motion. And he has a ton of credits to his name, including work with Bent Image Labs, the famous Pez films, Starburns, ShadowMachine, House Special, and Open the Portal Studio. And he has worked on commercials, music videos, and a whole bunch of short films. Plus, he's pretty well known in the stop motion community for his student work, where he experimented with a whole bunch of different techniques. And if you end up watching his student films, you'll instantly recognize that his style has been mimicked in many other stop motion projects. But not only is he an animator, he is also a fabricator, engineer, designer, and animation supervisor. And like I said before, today he is sharing absolutely everything you need to know about how to set up a small stop motion studio, basically in your bedroom, on a budget, all by yourself. So, Javan, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. What's going on with you?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Just glad to hang out and share some info and get some stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about this episode because way back when I was in high school, I just was filming with my grandpa's old camcorder and some dollar store plasticine and having a lot of fun. And I didn't really know anything about lighting or software or anything, or where to take it from there. So I do really want to talk about all that stuff. But first, I want to know a little bit more about your journey, because whenever I talk to somebody in stop motion, their journey is very random. It's not like they went specifically to school, got an entry-level job like a classic 2D animator did. So how hard was it for you to get into stop motion, and what kept you in it all this time?
Yeah, I think I had the same expectation. I did go to school for it, and that was kind of a result of, I went to school late. I went in and out of community college after high school and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I went through a television program and took some art classes and wanted to kind of mix all that up. And I really enjoyed what animation kind of had in store for the moving image for me. So I ended up at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn in their animation program and figured out, a lot more of the nuances and information I wanted out of what animation could do. I got involved in the community. The animation community in New York was incredible and really helpful in getting started, and got to know some people. And then I graduated 2008 and kind of tried to stick around New York for a while. It was a rough year that year, I would say. And then, Portland was home. So I ended up I just took a break and came back home and I just stayed here. I really love Portland. I love the weather, the outdoors. I do love the rain and except when we get sick of it. And but like gradually just got involved in stop motion. I won't say it was easy. I won't say it was, prohibitively difficult. But when I got back to Portland, I had a couple connections at Bent Image Lab, partially from um, people I knew in New York that had worked with them before, and I did like an internship in like '07 during the summer at Bent as well. So that I just had a con I just had I, I was on their list that I could, call them and be like, hey, I'm available. Is there anything I can help with? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll give you a call when we have something. And those were kind of few, it can be few and far between. Like when you're getting started out, like I definitely have like worked in the Irish pub and I've worked in the shoe factory and I've worked in, other stuff to get by. But when there was something that stop motion had for me, then I dropped everything and went to go play in their world for a few weeks, and that was often what could get me involved and get a leg up and get a start. You
So
know.
but like, why stop motion particularly? Because in Portland, you're surrounded by a lot of 2D studios, where I would assume there would be a lot more work in those areas. So what kept you in stop motion specifically?
Well, I can't draw. So like from a two-dimensional standpoint, it's not something I was terribly interested in. I can get by with drawing, but I'm really terrible at like staying on model and making sure those in-betweens are right. And I prefer working like in the physical world and moving things around. And I would say I'm a very spatially oriented person. I like how things fit together and how things interrelate to each other in three-dimensional space. So really, that is what kept me in stop motion world. I love it in stop motion world. I love moving things around. I love like lights and cameras and all of that stuff. Whereas like maybe in two-dimensional land or compositing, I did some compositing for a while. It wasn't as satisfying to like tactile sensibilities. So
So, when you got your first gig in stop motion, how much of a portfolio did you have before that point in time?
I had basically my reel from college. I had done a short that got a little bit of attention called My Paper Mind, and that was all done with like cut stencils and had a fun, um, a really nice effect. It was like um, a dimensional version of video feedback where like it was like one frame and then that frame would move backwards in space and the next frame would come up. And so you ended up with this fun tracer effect in dimensional space. And I had a lot of fun exploring that. And a lot of people liked it. So it kind of put me on radar um, for like working with like David Daniels. Like he got a look at it and liked it because I mean, it was partially inspired by the work David Daniels has done in StrataCut. With if you've seen that, it's like um, going through for lack of a better term, a log of clay that's been built in such a way that you cut away layers of it to reveal another frame, and it's just a fascinating way to think.
Yeah.
It's very fun to try to decipher it. So I'd look up any strata cut by David Daniels, and I don't know, I find all those things really inspiring. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Uh,
that kind of got attention enough there. And Andy London, an instructor I had at Pratt, also suggested to them that they maybe have a look at me. And I did an internship there in '07. I worked with Rob Shaw on a music video for They Might Be Giants called I'm Impressed. And yeah, I got to cut out a lot of paper stuff. I was working with a lot of paper stuff at the time, so it was just like a perfect fit, and I got to sort of like show off and make enough of an impression that I could come back later.
Well, from when you were 7 years old?
Oh no, in 2007.
Oh,
That's when that
2007.
that that
Okay.
internship was when, yeah, it was in
Okay.
2007. Um, oh, in '07. That's what I think I said. But yeah, and then even getting a start at Bent, it was like, just being a puppet wrangler and set, helping set dressing for like a commercial or something. It was all starting. I like to say I grew up in the art department when I talk about my career, in the sense that I got my start making things and moving things and building things and um, painting things and shaping things and making them ready for camera and getting them out to the stages and you know approaching everything from like a physical standpoint. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do everything involved in stop motion because eventually I wanted to direct, or maybe so I thought. I mean, that's still maybe something I want to do, but I think I like helping people achieve what they want to see. I think is a more fascinating process to me.
Yeah. So you've worked at a lot of different studios and a lot of different projects over the years, specifically in stop motion. What has been like the thing that's been really helpful in you getting to work on those opportunities? Like, do you advertise your services? Do you have like really good connections? Do you just always try to make the best like work? What has been the number one thing that's maybe taken you through your career?
I think at this point, it's just having been really like adaptable, and I like solving problems. I try. Sometimes it's hard, but I try not to look at problems as like problems and more as puzzles. Because you end up with a lot of projects that you come on, and it's like, who agreed to this? Why are we doing this? This is crazy. And then you take a step back and go, okay, great, here's how we can do it. And coming up with ways of accomplishing these things is kind of a thrill to me. I've kind of got a reputation as someone who can solve problems. um, I I don't know. I love thinking about this stuff and wrapping my head around some of the puzzles that are presented by these different weird stop motion animation projects. I love to see people thinking about stop motion differently. I love to help them think differently about stop motion. And I think the thing that has helped me the most is just being pretty versatile and more of a generalist. It's not that I am a particularly good character animator. I can do it, but it's more that I have a good grasp of the entire process. I think that's why
Yeah.
people have me back, is that I'm very useful throughout the process. So there's that. I think another thing is just like, um, I would say to anybody, just be honestly curious about everything, and that's gonna get you farther in that, like, it's something you want to be doing, and make sure that it still tickles your brain when you walk into the studio,
Yeah.
because that is, like, just like a healthy enthusiasm, and be, generally open to what's going on in the studio and how we're going to solve it and how we're going to change it and make it interesting and be excited about it. I think that's the kind of thing that's going to have people bring you back as an asset, is that you have a genuine enthusiasm for it and a genuine curiosity as to how it works and how we can make it better and how we can make it more interesting and more fun, and everybody can have a good time doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you haven't checked out Javen's work, I encourage you to, because he's worked on such an array of like different even types of stop motion that I wouldn't think of. Like you've you built like an entire room of like ocean. I don't even know how to describe it. Like an entire room that's an ocean with thousands of little pegs that move up and down to like make the water ripple all in sequence, and that's like I don't even know where to start or find somebody. So I think it's an amazing, and it speaks to your curiosity of always trying to figure out how to do something, what's needed in the whole process. That's really helped you. So maybe from the opposite perspective, what's been the toughest thing for you over your career that's pretty much spanned about a decade now?
I think the toughest thing One of the toughest things that I deal with personally, and this just comes from like you walk onto a project and it is like something new and unusual and you don't know how to solve it. Like you get that imposter syndrome thing and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, how did I even get involved in this? I'm way over my head, right? Like, what am I going to do here? And I have learned, and I still continue to learn to not listen to that and to back my own self up in the sense that I've done this and this and this and this, and all of these experiences are things that I bring to the table that are going to help me solve this problem in front of us. Like nobody has the solution. Like the ocean, for example, when
Yeah.
we looked at it, the director, Mark Smith, is like, I need an ocean. How are we going to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like you don't start from a place of knowing. You never start from a place of knowing. It's always over the course of the work and over the course of the job that you make these discoveries and solve these problems. So I think that's one thing that is like a blessing and a curse about working in stop motion is so many times, I mean, water is a great example. Like we're always doing it differently. Nobody ever wants the same thing. We want water in this context, or the water does this, or it does this, or it does this, and it's in this style. And we've always got to change and adjust how that's done. And there's been several ways of doing it in the past, and maybe it's not going to work this time. So we're going to try something different. So I'd say, just having to stay, for me, taking a step back and reminding myself that I do have a place here, especially it's always a different studio every time, everywhere I go, I meet a whole bunch of new and amazing people, and it's like it's just humbling how many incredible people you get to meet, and you have to remind yourself that you get to be a part of it and you are welcome here and you are needed here. I think that's one of the things that I would say. Another thing too, like over the years that I've gotten way better at is, especially as an animator, where you put all of this, you go behind the curtain and everybody leaves you alone and you spend all of this time on a shot and you work on the shot and you put all these little nuances in it and you struggle through it and you rush through it or you get good at whatever it is you're doing and it's like, this is great. Okay, I really like this shot, right? And you present that and the director's like, no, what's going on here? I don't know. I think we got to do this one again. And it's in those moments that I've learned, the first thing I learned was that I need to take a minute. I need to separate myself physically and get away for like 20 minutes before I can come back and be like, okay, let's talk about how I can do this again. Because the first thing you have to get over in that moment, the director's ready to like talk about how to do it differently and like, yeah, let's change this and do this when we do it again. And I'm still in a state where like, but you want to defend it. You just cared about it for, 3 to 7 hours and you really care about what you've done. And instantly it's all gone, right? You have to do it again. So I think being able to like sort of separate, take a breath, detach from it, and having had to do things over again, I know it's always better the second time. It always turns out better the second time, um, even if not to my standard, then to the standard of the person who's asking it of me, um, and just being able to kind of let go and not be defensive about something you've done and understand that we're all in this to be a part of this process and to achieve a vision that may not be your own. It's
Yeah.
got to fit within the context. Everybody is working to fit within the context of a greater whole. And being able to sort of let go of maybe some of your hard work and just know that you can do it again. You can do, all of these things that we're working on in stop motion, these are all coming from the people that are here, and you can do it, and I can do it over and over and over again, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I'm still getting paid to be here, so yes, I will do this again. And being able to kind of let go and take criticism that you may not even agree with, but it isn't your call, um, is a difficult thing to learn to adjust to in this
Yeah, well,
industry,
I'm
for
I'm
sure.
happy you brought that up because that's something that I struggle with, and I know a lot of other people struggle with too. Because when you're creating any type of art, it comes from such a personal place for myself first that if somebody else watches it and doesn't have an amazing reaction, or they're just like, eh, or they're like, oh, well, what about this thing? I immediately feel like it's like heart, like they just stabbed me in the heart and they're like twisting with every word. And it's so hard and it's so easy to get defensive and like, but at the end of the day, when you're creating something and putting it out there, it's not for you anymore. It's for somebody else to experience. So I actually was working on a shot the other day and thought about your words where you said, you told me this before, where it's always better the second time around. And I finished a shot for a short film I'm working on. I went home and I watched it and I felt kind of underwhelmed. But my immediate reaction was like, okay, move on. It's fine. Like, get over this. Let's work on the next shot. But I convinced myself to go back and redo it. And it was like 10 times better because I'd already figured out the process of what I was doing. I already figured out how to make it look better, et cetera. So I think that's a great skill to have and it's something kind of you have to develop over time is to take that criticism and kind of kill your darlings, as they say in the writing world. But yeah, so uh, I guess what is the feeling so you've gone through a lot of criticism and have to redo stuff, but like, what is that feeling that keeps you coming back for more? Like what that you've been able to make this out of a career and you still are really passionate about it and you do so many creative things. What's that feeling you get when you are happy with something?
Gosh, it's funny. I struggle to answer this sometimes, and like on some jobs too, like where I find that like around the middle of a job, but after we've gotten started and when we're kind of in the thick of it and just like repeatedly solving things, and before we get to the relief of the end of it, I start asking myself, like, why are we doing this? Like, why am I even doing this? What is going on? How is this rewarding? I never want to do this again. I'm out after this one. And I think everybody at some point gets those feelings. Um, Sometimes it's just seeing a shot. Sometimes it's seeing a shot in context in the edit, and sometimes it's the people or the interactions you have that's just like stupid stuff, like just stupid goofing around stuff between shots, and remembering how lucky we are to be just involved in a job where we're literally playing with toys all day.
Yeah.
And I you know I think about and I kind of dream about like finding something else that I would be good at doing, but I really enjoy wrapping my brain around all of the interesting things that stop motion has to offer. Like I get to use all the parts of my brain. I get to use, like, I mean, between, composition and just like spatial puzzle solving, and like you get to break down time and gravity into like very tiny increments and just get so hyper focused on these details that just we all take for granted in our everyday lives. Like I- just objects will just have history. They have rust or they have scratches or whatever. There is there's a physical record on everything. Like things go through things, and you get to really dive in and analyze what those things are, and you get to adjust what that record is. Like stop motion is a record of a physical object as it moves through space, or whatever you do with it to create a new record of what it's done, to create a new idea of something having its own life and having its own story. Um, so when I get, kind of upset at things, I just remember that these are the things I really nerd out on, like from a philosophical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a like how I relate to the universe sort of standpoint, is that it's very grounding in a weird way. It makes me feel a part of something, and I feel useful, and I feel involved, and yeah, and I get to meet amazing people that do it as well. So yeah, I think anytime it gets hard, I just remember all these really incredible things, and I don't know how I could give them up. Like I don't know how I
Love
could give it
that.
up.
So what is something you're working on right now, or what's exciting you going forward?
Right now I've got some free time, so I've been kind of cleaning up my absolute just kind of disaster of a general workspace where I keep some things. That's a small portion of it. There's like a room in the back that's absolutely loaded. I'm a terrible hoarder of like raw materials and objects and things. Like just reaching over, I have like random. This is a pinball from something, or like there's my rock collection, or things to fidget with. Here's a cup full of Ninja Turtles toys from a Ninja Turtles spot. Like it just, it's a disaster, but there's always something to make something out of. And when I need something, I tend to have it. Or if I don't have it, I can make it. Um, and yeah, I think right now I just kind of get time to play. I just got to get really involved with my hobby community with some video game stuff that's everybody has to get together. So I got to help and be kind of community organizer for that. And yeah, I spend my downtime playing video games, but also having a good time exploring concepts and just moving things around on a table.
So
So,
like, I guess looking forward, what is your ultimate dream of a project you'd want to work on?
oh man,
Like no restrictions in money or time or in people involved or whatever. Like
you
what
know,
you mentioned before that you were thinking of directing, and you've worked on so many different things over the
yeah,
years. What's something that you're really excited about working on?
I think absolute dream. I've never seen this yet, but what I keep kind of like putting out and suggesting to people who maybe might have some influence over who can make that decision is that I would love to see almost like not a vaudeville show, but a nice variety program on. I don't know if it's something that Netflix does or who any of these publishers does, but I want to see short films. I want to see people doing things that are out of the ordinary. I want to see stop motion short films like kind of collected and presented. Like here's a block of. I love film festivals. I love seeing like entire blocks of short animations, and I would love to see that as like a program choice or something I could just go watch. I think it gets harder and harder to collect and view good quality content, especially on the internet. There's so much, and there's so
Yeah.
much good stuff, and it's so hard to find it, I think. And you can be plugged in and looking at things, but I think being able to find really good stuff, I think that's somebody. There's a vacuum there. If somebody can
Yeah.
find and put together the really good stuff and make it in a presentation, I'd love to see that. I'd love to work on things that get involved in that end up in that. Stop motion experiments. Anybody doing something new and unusual that they want to try in stop motion. I love seeing that. I love helping out with that. Like, um, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe one day I can just be a consultant and tell people no, they shouldn't do that.
Did you end
um,
up seeing the Love, Death, and Robots
I
short series
did.
on like
I
you're thinking like something like that for stop motion maybe?
Yeah, I think that would be a great start. I think that I wish that I don't feel like it got the reception I expected it to get, and I mean even from myself, like I think it was
Yeah.
there was a bit more shock value sort of appeal in it than I'm like comfortable with, and maybe that's probably just me getting old, but I wanted a little more. I think I just want more wholesome stuff these days. I think I just I think I'm just getting older, and I'm tired of a lot of blood, gore, and violence towards people, and I want some more wholesome, wondrous, curious, experimental, interesting content. And so, anybody out there doing any of that, I'd love to get involved.
I
um,
feel you. So we had an interesting chat kind of before this podcast, and I wanna before we get into like setting up the basics of your home studio and producing like commercial level work, maybe this is a good time to chat about stop motion as a medium itself because it's it's like interesting for me that stop motion is making a wave of a comeback now because when I was in high school there was like no stop motion. It really discouraged me because CG was becoming a huge thing and all the investment and like economy was going there. The industry is basically like 2D CG and a little bit of stop motion now. So why do you think stop motion is still thriving, given that you've been able to work on so many cool projects over the years? Like, what is the main reason that people are still investing and interested in stop motion when we can mimic reality with
sure,
CG and also stop motion with CG, like the Lego movie, for instance?
sure.
And 2D is so cheap, right?
Yeah, I think I think it comes down to like that thing you can't place. It's hard to like put your finger on it, and I'm gonna try to over generally simplify and summarize it. Is that um, there's something inherently entertaining to your brain to see something move in a way that you don't expect, right? Like just to watch a coffee cup walk across a table. Um, I mean, it's it's different. It's something that you have to reassess how you think about a coffee cup, how you think about gravity, how you think about reality in general, and anything that can do that to your brain is going to be entertaining. I think anything that can kind of shake up or poke or bend your perception of reality is going to be engaging by the very nature of it. Like your brain is going to engage with the subject at hand. Um, and I think that's where stop motion really shines in that it takes like real things and you on some human level understand that it's a real object. um, I think that is where stop motion shines, and I don't think that necessarily always translates to really high end stop motion. I think there's kind of I'm not going to say an uncanny valley, but a happier valley where it's not smooth or beautiful enough to be mistaken for a different medium. We're not
Yeah.
trying to, we don't need to crawl out of that valley to exceed what stop motion is. I think part of what makes stop motion industry is, stop motion, part of what makes stop motion interesting is understanding that it is stop motion, is understanding that there is some sort of play with time and with space. And yeah, you can fake a lot of that in CG. I think things that can be faked convincingly in CG should be, partially because it affords a lot of ease of adjustment, and there's a lot of things that maybe even might be more expensive to do in CG, but it affords you the capacity to make changes. There's plenty of reasons to do it in CG and not use stop motion at all. Where stop motion really shines is where it calls attention to itself, and the audience is reminded and kind of rides that line between they're watching a story and they're watching a process. They're watching and they're viewing art, but they're also viewing what I want to say, fabrication. Like it's old art debate of idea versus process. And sort of riding the line between those two, I think, is where stop motion really shines, and I think it's what makes it the most interesting. And I think that's why we keep going back to it. On top of nostalgia, I think is another big driver. Like agencies and clients are always wanting, say, we want it to look like Rudolph. We want that Christmas stuff. We want a nice wintry thing to sell our phones or whatever, because it plays on nostalgia. It plays on a lot of stuff that used to be. It used to be stop motion was the only way to do special effects, like in terms of big monsters and whatever. Up until Jurassic Park, we were doing everything in stop motion to create monsters. So there's nostalgia there, and that's another appeal. That's another big appeal. But really, I think it comes down to it being an engaging and entertaining medium that can be played with. And I think the more that we can do that, the better off we are in moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, at least for myself, I started playing with stop motion because it was so fun to take something that was real and see it come alive. Versus, like, I don't know, if I want to do like fire special effects, I'll just go to CG because I can just make that look real. So I think it's interesting that you've kind of, I haven't really seen it defined in like a thesis way, but you've kind of defined it as like stop motion is this middle ground between like the you have CG, which is can be like mimics reality and is like super smooth and everything, and then you have stop motion where you still are reminded that this is real and fabricated and part of a process. But once you get to a point where the stop motion looks CG, then it's almost like, why not just use CG then, right?
Again, that's my personal opinion, and I think there's absolutely something to pushing an art form to its absolute limit in terms of what's possible.
Yeah.
Like, and if that's your reason for using stop motion, more power to you. Please do it. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to like raise that bar of quality and possibility, because that allows everybody else playing down here, where I guess where I am is where I want to see is it enables us more tools to achieve simpler goals, which may have been out of reach. I mean, the incredible thing now is that we have enough stop motion tools to do all these things that maybe weren't accessible to me 10 years ago. I have tools now that I I would have lost my mind over when I was in college. Like we were doing things on a lunchbox on a lunchbox to VHS, which even that was an incredible advancement on literally taking frames on a film camera, on a Bolex or something, on a 16 millimeter camera. So everything driving that art form, great, welcome, like please do more. That's incredible. I think that just makes it all the more accessible for these kids today to use these tools to create fun things and make stories and make objects move, or to experiment in how things move in space. I don't know. Yeah. What was the
So in that,
question?
in that well, it just in that light, I guess, what is something that no other medium has it been able to touch that stop motion can still touch, that makes sense only in stop motion?
I think just playing with time and space from the physical world. Like again, like stop motion is the heart of filmmaking, right? Like the inception of filmmaking is inherently related to stop motion. You have a recording of space and time. You've taken a series of images and then lined them all up to create the illusion of movement, to replay or to, see this record of time. And it will always be a core aspect of filmmaking. Like it will always be at the heart of it, at the inception of it, at the beginning of it. It's just a series of images strung together from different points in time to create its own timeline, to create its own illusion of movement. And I don't think anything we can do can like take that away. I even as fast as we can get our frame rates to go, it still comes down to a record and slicing time up into little bitty parts and putting it all back together again to present it.
Can you imagine a stop motion film like 60 frames per second?
I don't want to. I prefer not to.
Um, so, so you mentioned like pushing the medium and when it's right to use stop motion. Can you think of a specific example just to give me an idea of a film or short film or project or something that you think does a really good job of utilizing stop motion as the medium?
Gosh, I was kind of rolling over my head. I feel like yes, there's a bajillion examples, and I'm always really terrible at coming up with one on the spot. But things like actually no, I take it back. I wrote something down. Johan, I think it's Ripma, Rijpma. This is somebody who plays a lot with with concepts of time and space and stitching them back together. There was a short he did probably about 10 years ago called Tiles, but Tegels. I think I'm not sure what language that is, but it's just pictures of um, like concrete tiles on the ground and things that are a repeated shape, but the content of each shape is different. So creating movement and creating a different record of motion and time within the confines of what you can find on the street is a fascinating concept to me. Anybody breaking things out into the real world, there's great stuff that is maybe like a series of paintings or art on walls all over town. So one frame will be over here, down here on the sidewalk, and another frame is up here on a wall. And you just take a picture of all of those things and you put it together. And again, you've created a separate record of time and space that now runs together to create this movement, to create this new story. Um, um, Anything Max Winston is doing, he does a great job of just like putting things together in a different way that we don't think about and create something new with space and light and objects and time. Um, Johnny Kelly, I love his work. Has great concepts in stop motion, and is in no way limited by stop motion. And I think that's an important thing too. While stop motion is the tool to help stories, it doesn't necessarily have to be the ends of we're doing it because we're doing it in stop motion. I think stop motion is a tool to use to tell stories. So as long as you have a good idea or story to tell, um, then and stop motion is a good medium to do it in, by all means. Like I think Pest is a great example of that, and he'll tell you the same thing in the sense that he maybe didn't even set out to be an animator, but stop motion was a way for him to convey some ideas that he had. So that stop motion made it possible. So that was the medium that gets chosen for some of his ideas that he has.
Yeah.
It's
I
that's
like
the
what
way
you
you
just
get
said
things to move.
about kind of starting with a story and finding the right medium that will tell that story. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm also I'm gonna include links to all these incredible people you listed in the description of this podcast. If you're listening, check out that. But so let's maybe switch it up a little bit and talk more about if you're beginning in stop motion or want to begin in stop motion, or you've got a story to tell and you've realized that stop motion is kind of the way to go. Like I said, I discovered stop motion from like playing with plasticine and Lego and like moving it frame by frame on my dresser, and I didn't know anything about lighting. And so like when I played back the first thing that I created, like the entire video is flickering like dark to light because of the clouds
Sure.
going by outside. I guess let's talk about what exactly kind of equipment and software and like knowledge and tools you need to, at like a minimum, to set up like a bedroom stop motion studio if you're a beginner, but still create studio level professional looking work. So maybe we could talk about that. What's like the first thing somebody should be aware of, I guess? from your perspective?
Yeah. I think the best place to start is to understand that you're in control, and in the sense that you're in control of the lighting, and you're in control of the framing, and you're in control of the camera, and all of those things are difficult to control. Your example of, like, if you're anywhere near a window, your lighting is going to change over time just by the nature of the sun, and by the nature of things happening in a realm that's outside of your control. So the first thing you need to do is, like, I've got some black curtains that maybe I use in a pinch, or I'll throw up some duvetine, which is like a thick black curtain, to shut out that light, so that the only light hitting my whatever I'm working with is under my, like, sphere of influence. Same thing with the camera, where possible. Don't let it do anything automatically. Like, it might autofocus on you, like a webcam is going to do things to try to, like, autofocus on something. So you're not going to be in control of that. You have to take the control away from the webcam. There's generally software for any webcam you have, supplied by the company, that you can go in and uncheck the box and you can do it yourself. Um, so being in control of the light, being in control of the camera, and being in control of where the images are going, and that usually leads to, like, stop motion software, and all the options therein. So just recognizing where the variables are is your first step, and understanding what you're not in control of, and then getting that to a place where it's not going to change on you. um, that's like your first step. Stop motion has a really cool thing where you don't have to worry about audio during. So it can be a loud environment. I can have trains going by. I can have a refrigerator buzzing. It doesn't matter. I don't care about room tone. I don't have to worry about audio. I'm terrible with audio. Any sound designers want to work with me, because I'm a disaster with audio in general. I don't think in audio terms. I think in, like, how it's moving. So I think, yeah, start from a place where you can get your environment that you're working in under control. This might be like picking the back room that has no windows. This might be just, like, yeah, just setting aside a space in your room that is going to be not touched for much longer than you think you're going to need. It could be like, yeah, I can do this for 20 minutes, and then, as long as nobody comes in, then it'll be fine. Um, no, it's going to take longer. It always takes longer than you think. Um, so yeah, like, start with a space you can control.
Yeah. I like that advice because and like on top of that, for me, I've learned to just tie down everything. Like I might accidentally bump the camera or light or even the desk and it moves an inch out of the way, but then when you watch your video, there's a big jerk right in the middle of it, and then everything changes and it just trips up your experience. So yeah, I think it makes sense to have an environment that you can control. And yeah, so let's go through everything like one by one. So let's talk about what kind of camera you need because you mentioned webcam. So if I'm just starting out, like what can I use? Can I use my phone? Should I buy a DSLR? What about my webcam? Like what's going to give me the best result?
If you're just starting out, you've never done this before, like, use anything you get your hands on. I mean, I'm a big fan of, like, I keep a lot of crap around because I like to work with whatever I have at hand. And so the more crap I have around, the more I have to work with, right? So I have an old iPhone that I can use to do some animation tests. I want to play with, like, macro stuff. So there's, like, those little magnetic lenses that you can stick on an iPhone or whatever. Like, I can screw around with some macro stuff and maybe try things really tiny. I like tiny things. I think Bruce Bickford, who we lost this last year, had the right idea. He had a whole thing on, I don't have the money for a lot of space and, that sort of thing. But what I do have is a little space. So if I work small, then I don't need a big space, right? Like, I don't need to have all that access to all that big thing. So work with what you have. Work with what you have access to. Even if it is just a webcam, you can still make things that get the idea across. You can still tell your story if that's what your aim is with what you have at hand. That said, you can always go up from there. Like don't wait to do your idea until you have all the equipment and all the big things and all the, exactly the right stuff, because you'll never get it done. I'm very guilty of this, of the
Plus,
same
you might
thing.
not even know if you like doing it, right? Like you might
Oh
buy all
yeah.
the equipment and then realize you hate the process.
Yeah, I think the important part of your story, even and my story and everybody's story, is that it's something you're drawn to. And if you find you start playing with this stuff and you don't like playing with this stuff, don't do it. I think play is probably the most important aspect of getting started with this stuff. If you don't have a curiosity and you're not entertained by it, and you don't want to struggle through those parts that are really frustrating because you're just not into it, the end result, if you don't get joy out of it, don't do it. I think that's one of the biggest things about stop motion and why people get stuck into it, is because we honestly enjoy the process of it. It's a fun thing to go from just anything. I just keep grabbing things just to like go from an object and make it like wobble across the desk, and you play it back and then it's its own object wobbling across the desk. That's cool. And if you don't get joy out of that, then that's okay. You found out that maybe that's not your thing. But don't make all the huge, crazy investments to find out that it's not your thing. Start with what you have at hand. And generally, it tends to be like a webcam or a spare old phone that you can plug in. Even Dragon Frame recognizes like iPhones and has an iPhone tether that's really cool these days. Which I guess brings me to kind of like software. If you go kind of down the chain, I need a camera, I might need some lights, I need a space. And the next step is you need a way to put images together, right? A way to stitch all these moments together so that you have a moving image. Um, I Dragon Frame is amazing, and you can get it. I think I haven't looked in a while because I bought my license so long ago, and it like lasts forever, and you rarely have to upgrade. But compared to something like the Adobe Creative Suite, even like with Photoshop and Illustrator, all those things, Dragon Frame is very cheap at like $300. It sounds like a lot of money, but if this is something you're into, you're going to have it and use it forever. And it's great. It lets you do anything you want to do, and it allows you to expand into anything you don't know you want to do yet. Um, Dragon Frame is definitely the top notch in my book. That said, going back to using with what you have, um, I can't remember I think it's just called stop motion, and I know it works really well with iOS and Apple systems, and it's really simple, really direct and easy to use. And it's super cheap. It's like free, and then you can do like a couple add-ons if you want to like add sound or different onion skins or different ways of doing things. Um,
Do you
so
know, so like, just to kind of keep on that free software, I know somebody specifically asked about this too, and I started stop motion when I was in high school and had zero money, like just zero money. Is there any other free software that you know of, or like other free editing tools? Like I used like iMovie sometimes when I was doing stop motion in the beginning, and it was so hard because iMovie doesn't really recognize frames. So you have to
right.
like clip down a video clip to like the minimal point as possible and put them all together, which takes a lot of work, but it still has the same effect. So do you know of any other free softwares perhaps for the computer or whatnot?
Gosh, not off the top of my head, just because it's been so long. There used to be
That's
ones
fair.
called like way back when, like I used like I think it was called iStop Motion. It wasn't an Apple product, but they were jumping on the whatever naming conventions that Apple was using at the time just to kind of blend. But it was called iStop Motion, and that got me through for a while. Um, I think there's one out there called Stop Motion Pro, but I've never used it, and I don't know I think it's very cheap, and I think it might be ready to go. I think if you just do some digging, I think you'll be able to find something. There used to be a really rudimentary one called Frame Thief. I have no idea where that one is now, because again, that was like 10 years or more ago. Um, I think you're going to be able to find something. I think if you just start digging for free stop motion software, I think you'll find something. If you do find you enjoy stuff, like find a way to get access to, or maybe you can borrow a license from a friend, or if you're involved in the stop motion community at large, somebody generally has a license for a Dragon frame that you can like use for a while they're not using it. Because it's worth looking into because it just makes things it has a good interface that it's very robust. You can do all of the things that you think you're going to need to do with it. I know I just made a speech about work with what you got, but it's it's a good one to have access to if you have.
Well, no, I think that's a good point too, because there's a huge value in finding a community of people who are into the same thing as you. For me, that was stopmotionanimation.com, but and where do you go for connecting and with other stop motion animators?
I mean, fortunately, I'm involved well enough that like I will call someone I know, and that goes to assistant camera people, or people that do lighting, or people that build puppets, or people that do armatures, or riggers, or puppet fabricators, or sculptors. So I have a pretty good network that I've built up over the years of like people I know I can just ask questions of when I'm really in a pinch. But oh my gosh, there is such a wealth of information out there just on the internet. There's a guy on YouTube that I really enjoy watching, Edu Puertas, and I believe he's in Spain. And I've just been following his journey of like getting better at machining armatures and doing stop motion and building his little studio. And he has a wealth of information. He's been doing like tests of like how much to wrap your wires or don't wrap your wires, or what wires to use. And there's so much information. I haven't found the time to catalog it all, and I don't think anybody will. I think again, your curiosity is going to drive you, and let it, and just learn how to search because it's out there and there's people that do it. And absolutely do not be afraid to, yeah, email or message me, or anybody that you find and enjoy their work, because I would say 85-90% of the time, these people are more than willing to give you an answer or to help you find something that, you wouldn't even think about. Um, the stop motion community is much smaller than you think. It's a lot of very incredible and humble people, and they're all very generous with their time and techniques and information. So I think the trick there is just don't be afraid to ask. Find the people that are doing things you want to try, and ask them how they do it. Yeah.
Well, thank you also for being so generous and sharing your knowledge on this podcast.
Yeah.
Javen's one of the people that I reached out to and said, yeah, so 100%. I feel like if you're in stop motion, you love it so much because it's why else would you be in stop motion, like moving things minute millimeters for hours at a time unless you really loved it. So, yeah, you also mentioned lighting, and I do want to talk a little bit about that because that's been one of the biggest banes of stop motion for me, is because sometimes I'm working with such small little characters, they'll have like a huge shadow or like it'll be uneven lighting. Or I'll have a hot spot. I know somebody asked a specific question about hot spots on flat surfaces,
Hmm.
particularly in cutout animation. How do you get some good consistent lighting so that like if you I don't know, just one example is I have a character and then I have a little background that I made and the character's shadows on the background so it doesn't look like a background anymore. It looks like a
Right.
cutout that's just behind the character, right? So
Right.
how do you get some good like good coverage lighting that looks professional but also on a dime too?
Sure. I think Yeah, that's a good question, and there are so many answers, and so many of them come from just like an understanding of how light works. Like, don't be afraid to just go to the library and get books on photography. They're gonna have everything. Like everything I know about lighting has been, I took some photography classes in like community college and college, and that kind of got me a rough start. But I wasn't very good at it. I'm still not very good at it, but my understanding of it has grown immensely just from working around people who know how it works. Um, Look up angle of incidence, and there's entire like tomes of how that works and what that means and how lights work. Something about I think it's called the inverse square rule. Something about doubling the distance and quartering the light or half the light. And it's all of these like things that are very hardwired into physics. Like these are things that you're just not getting around, and you have to find how these tools work. Um, I have like a couple suggestions for like flat plane stuff. Just understanding that if I have a camera, it can see like in a wedge, right? Like, let me see. Just a second. All right. So my camera, it can see like that sort of wedge, right? And if you follow that wedge to, I'm going to say the bottom of the frame, it can also see if this is a reflective plane, it can also continue that wedge. Like the wedge would keep going down through the table, but that wedge is going to continue bounce back up. And I'm going to be able to see all that in that area if it's in reflective. So if I have any lights between here and like here, like in that wedge, I'm going to be able to see them in the camera in the reflection, right? It's like playing pool on a pool table. You know that if you bounce it off that wall, it's also going to come down at the same angle to come down this way. Um, you have to think about that when you're looking at optics, when you're looking at lights and how they bounce. Um, Smaller lights, the smaller the point is, the harder the shadow will be. So like a broader light, let's see if I can turn one on. Like up here, I've got some just like, they're just like fluorescent bar lights. I think these are actually LED. They're really light. And I think they're pretty cheap too.
So if I'm starting out,
That would take some work.
That's all right.
I'm not going to do it.
If people are listening, they won't be able to see it anyways. But I will
Fair
post it
enough.
on YouTube. So if I'm just starting out and I'm in my bedroom and I have like one incandescent bulb in the ceiling, what can I add to that or take away from that to get some good basic lighting for what I want to do?
Desk lamps. I
Desk
think
lamp.
desk lamps on swing arms are so great, and very helpful in terms of putting a light where you need it. Um, and go ahead, like light up the shadows that you see. Like just dump a bunch of light in there to chase them out. Um, but yeah, angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. That's like just something that sits in the back of my head, and that helps you with those things that you have the camera up and over and you're looking down on, like any paper animation or stuff like that. You want your lights as far to the side as you
Ah,
can. You don't want them directly overhead, because then that does like give you weird hot spots that are just kind of bouncing and reflecting off of whatever surface you're looking at, because that's bouncing straight back up into the camera. It's like, imagine if you were holding a flashlight next to your head and pointing it at yourself in the mirror. That's what you're going to see. That's
right.
what the camera wants to see. So the farther off to the side you can get that, I think the better off you're going to be. And the hardest part then is just kind of keeping things even. So you kind of want them. You kind of have to split the difference between as far out and as far in as you can get
Gotcha.
without the
So,
cameras.
well, that makes the reflection of incidence or whatever it's called, that makes a lot of sense to me. I never actually thought about it like that before. I'm gonna have to research that. So, maybe like two or three desk lamps are gonna be good for your rudimentary stuff that
Yeah.
you need to do and spread out. Actually, I just thought of something that I started doing recently because the tech woman at Sheridan College helped me out with the lighting because I was dealing with hotspots. She just aimed the lights at the ceiling which actually ended up reflecting evenly over my set, and I had never thought to do that before.
Yeah,
So,
bounce.
um, bounce, yeah, the bounce.
Yeah, like that helps you like get it effectively makes a nice broad light for you. Like right now, I don't have like a desk lamp pointed at my face. I have it pointed at the wall. But if I point it at my face, it's a
Yeah.
disaster. Um, but it's another like visual one that doesn't translate. But yeah, like if you want to get a nice broad even light, use a bounce card. It's just a big white, just big piece of poster board from wherever you can get it, and point the light at that away from your set, and then that way you just get nice soft shadows. Nothing's really hard. The smaller the source of light, the harder the shadow. The
Yeah.
sun is very far away and very bright and a very tiny thing in the sky, and that's why you end up with very sharp shadows everywhere that the sun casts, right? Whereas um, if you bounce a light off the ceiling, then you have a nice, almost like overcast light, right? It's like the clouds are in the way. You get soft shadows on everything, right?
Yeah. Cool. So at this point, we've talked about kind of the camera you need, the software setup, block out or control your room, block out all light, etc., and some of the lighting. What are some other tools that are really helpful when it comes to stop motion before you even get like a character or clay or anything like that?
Wire.
Wire, yeah.
Aluminum wire, just so much wire, just little ways of defying gravity. Because as soon as you start animating, you're going to find you want a character to jump or fly or float, or something needs to move through the air and it needs to appear unsupported, or you just need something to hold it up there. Even fishing line from above. If you don't have a way of painting things out, go old school and use fishing line. Just You're going to need a lot of tape and a lot of maybe something malleable to hold things up, like clay, or and all of this is leading to what all of these things are called rigging, right? In all anytime you use something to hold something else up and keep it where you want it to be, you've rigged it. It is rigged. You have used rigging to hold it there. And you're going to need a lot of rigging, and rigging ranges from bubble gum to highly machined, intricate parts. So
Have you used bubblegum before?
um, I can neither confirm nor deny that. I think at this moment in time, I joke about that, but like I use a lot of sticky wax, which has a consistency that's a little bit could some days be like bubble gum. But yeah, I use a lot of sticky wax, which is kind of like almost like it's like a bit softer than like beeswax and a little
Okay.
bit stickier,
Do you,
so that it kind of adheres to stuff.
Another question that I have that I'm dealing with right now is weights. I have trouble finding something that's small but really heavy
Hmm.
to hold down a rig. Is there something like lead or something that you particularly use?
I would personally stay away from anything marked lead, and that's just from a personal thing involving lead is toxic. It's not good. You don't want to have it on your hands and then eat a sandwich. It's not good for you. We try to not use it. It's very tempting because there's some like lead sheeting that you can put under a piece of cloth that makes it really beautifully malleable. Just don't. Just don't. I think your long-term health is gonna thank you for not using anything labeled lead. But in terms of like, so steel, in terms of weight, steel becomes your kind of next go-to, as being something nice and heavy. Like, use if you have some weights, like literal, like bench press weights laying around, or somebody with a weight set. Those are good to really hold down big things. um, but another thing to maybe look at, if you can't get like a weight on the back of like an arm that reaches something or over something, just look at how you're, how do I want to say this? How you're structurally orienting something. Because if you've got like a foot, this is another visual thing. Like if you got a foot with an L and the bottom part of the L is under the object that you're supporting, you're not going to have to worry about how much that surface weighs. Whereas like if you've got a weight over on this side of the set and you've got an arm that has to reach across the set, you need more weight at the back. That's just levers. You want to keep that lever as short as possible. So if you can actually just change where the fulcrum is, you don't need as much weight, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, like weight sets.
So this is, I want to talk about like armatures and things like that, but one question that just popped into my mind. So if we're working with rigs, what is like for me, I edit out the rig in Adobe Photoshop in each frame, and then I import that into whatever video software I'm using, like Premiere or After Effects, whatever. So what is the best way for a beginner who hasn't um, removed the rig from the final production yet? What's the best way for them to do so?
I think a Photoshop program is, and I say that to mean a program like Photoshop that you have access to. If you have Photoshop, do it. I would start there, knowing that you're eventually going to start removing rigs in After Effects, or removing rigs in a compositing program further down the line. Because doing it first, like frame by frame, and physically sort of like painting it out and using a clean plate, which is an image of the set without the puppet in it. That's what you're going to use to replace any part where the rig is showing in the frame. Um, you're basically going to cookie cutter out the rig to reveal the set. Um, do it in like something like Photoshop first, because that's going to give you a better idea of how rig removal works. That's going to conceptually ingrain in you what you're doing in compositing. When you're then working in compositing, it makes more sense, and you'll be able to sort of get your head around solutions when there's rigs all over the place, because we no longer have any regard for what it's going to take after we shoot it. It depends on how mean an animator is going to be to you as a compositor. But like coming from a place where I did compositing and I did have to edit out my own rigs the hard way, has made me a better animator, a kinder animator to the people who have to then composite out um, like rigs and things that they have to hide from my process.
Does it make it like, should I be painting my rig like green or something like that to make it easier for green screen or masks or anything, or does that even matter?
There, there are several schools of thought. I think it depends on uh, one, it depends on the compositor. It depends on the background. If you're using a green screen background, yeah, green rigs are good. If you're using just the set itself as the background and you're using that as your clean plate, um, depending on your puppet and what your puppet looks like, um, will depend on what you want to do to that rig. If it's a light colored puppet, you might want to put black tape around your rig. You know, you might want that to be a nice contrasting line where it meets the puppet. That will get a good result. If it's a shiny surface puppet, you have a different issue to worry about. It is a very case by case basis, and often we'll be on set. I won't even have the answer. We'll have to bring down the person from VFX or post to look at it and be like, oh, please paint that white. Oh, please paint that black. Please use green here. Actually, you know, what would be really great is purple, you know, or something like that. Often it is very specific to the case, and it's specific to a compositor's preference. If you find it easier to paint all your rigs green, do it. If you find it easier to just leave them naked and just hide them and paint them out in post, do it. You know, I think whatever, especially these days where compositing technology has gotten much stronger than when I was doing it more regularly, I'm always surprised at what compositors asked for.
So, sure. Kind of, if I'm just starting out, should I even be worried about rig removal? Like, I know that I can, if I want to put together a portfolio of stop motion, for instance, I can not worry about compositing at all and still just show all the rigs and everything, and that should be fine. Is that right? From your perspective?
From my perspective, if anybody is looking at your reel to judge you as an animator, they don't care about your rigs. They don't care about seeing your rigs. They don't care how well you've removed a rig. Um, they care about what your animation looks like. They're looking at the character. I, as an animator or an animation director or anybody else on the show who's looking at your reel and your footage to judge your animation, isn't looking at your rigs. Don't worry about removing them if you're putting together something for a reel.
Makes
Um,
sense.
yeah.
So now we've kind of talked about like all the equipment and setup and like some tips on that, but maybe from like putting together a portfolio perspective, what is something that somebody should be animating? Like, you can use clay, you can use armatures, you can use physical objects, like you can have like a book jump up and down. If you want to go I want to make a career out of this from a commercial standpoint, what are some of the things that you should start from the beginning to animate?
Yeah. I think you know, animators start with the bouncing ball. I'm partial to physics, so if I can see something like loft in the air and come down and bounce or hit the ground with weight, that's helpful for me to judge. If I'm looking at someone and judging their character animation, I want to see something walking with personality. It's one thing to just make it walk, and that's its own difficult thing. It's another thing to make it walk with purpose or with hesitation or with a limp or with a struggle, like that anything that tells a story. If I look at just a snippet of animation and I feel like there is something more implied, if there is a story or a circumstance that's implied, like that's a big plus. If you can relay an idea through your animation, if you can relay a feeling or an emotion through your animation, that's what I think is most important. Sometimes it's not about having the perfect arc. That's kind of my preference, but people are also going to be watching your arcs, as they say. There's a whole podcast episode on arcs. Look up arcs in animation and study how that works because there's a whole deep thing about arcs. What else? Yeah, I want to see. I'm a physics guy. I like to see things have weight, and because we have to fake that in animation, we fake gravity, we fake weight, we fake size. So anything you have that is light, if you can make it look heavy, if something is heavy and you can make it look light, anything that shows something different from what it is, that's going to help you stand out, I think. That's going to show an understanding of animation.
Yeah, and just for clarity, arcs are like going from like point A to B, not in a straight line, but in like a flowing, interesting line using like the principles of animation and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, cool. So why don't we chat about like what you're actually animating? So should I go out and buy an armature right away to start testing out stuff with that? Should I just start by animating what's around me? Like if I don't know where to begin, what's a good place that's gonna teach me the basics and give me a good understanding of what stop motion is really like as a process?
Yeah. While I would say I don't do a lot of clay work, I don't know a lot of people who do a lot of clay work. I think clay is a good place to start. Like I've taught like fourth graders stop motion, and I mean Legos are great. Legos are handy. I'm still using them. You're just gonna see more Lego stuff out of me because I treat them like my clay. I can make different shapes out of them and make them jump and explode and do different things easily, quickly. It's a malleable thing. Um, um, I think if you want to do character stuff and you don't want to build your own armature, buy an armature. They are expensive, so that could prohibit doing it. Make one out of wire first. Like um, put it together with something that hardens, like a propoxy or something. Please use a respirator when you use it. Or like there's some great plastic that is like malleable when it gets to a certain temperature and then cools off. And but make your own armatures out of just wire and something hard or blocks of wood. Just put two legs and stick them into just a chunk of wood and just try two legs and see what two legs gets you. You don't have to animate a whole body to start with. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to animate an entire character. So start with pieces, start with little things, start with segments. Um, Try an inchworm, just try a piece of wire. I think I'm somebody who just grabs whatever's nearby. So grab whatever's nearby. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. As for the wire armature, I was doing it wrong for so long. I wasn't twisting my wire. So like after three bends, it would just break. So
Yeah.
twist your wire.
Well, I
Um,
mean, there's different schools of thought on that too.
fair enough. Okay.
Like it depends on what you're looking at. I am not a fan of twisting wire. I am a fan, however, of like bundling wire with and then using thread to wrap it to hold it together, and that way it kind of like slips across itself and doesn't stress it out as much. There's so many ways of doing it. Again, yeah, check out Edu Puertas. He is a good sort of he actually has a YouTube video on whether or not to twist wire, and it's very interesting.
I've
I
seen a
found
lot
it
of his stuff. I
fascinating.
haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
So if you're listening,
cool.
don't twist your wire or twist it. Who knows? Uh, so sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I do have a lot of questions that were kind of submitted to me specifically for you in regards to the starting out as a beginner or like whatnot. So maybe we can just go through those kind of to wrap it up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. So I'm just going to go through them. What is the most useful tool for stop motion? Like when you're
Oh,
animating?
if I am animating on a set, it's basically like a poker.
Poker?
Just anything that is smaller than your finger or your fingernail. So a lot of tweezers, a lot of little sort of there'll be like sculpture tools that are a tiny ball on the end of a stick, or I literally use little sticks. Anything smaller than your fingernail, anything that can reach or pinch or move something that is smaller than your fingers could do. I think those are like the best, most go-to tools I have, and I keep them in like a pencil case. Um, yeah, that's for like right on set. And sticky wax. It was for like sticky wax is very particularly specific. I'll get you like a link or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
I usually just use extra plasticine, but it's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't hold up so well. It's just available. I usually do dollar store runs before I try to animate and just grab random craft supplies and
Hmm.
a whole bunch of wire, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if there's a name for this, but somebody asked, what is the setup that allows someone to upload frames to the computer right away after they take a pic called? Is there a name for that process?
Oh, I saw that. I feel like I this is like a great pop quiz because I should definitely know the answer to that, and I'm sure that there is some sort of like um better industry name, but I want to just say frame grabber, and that goes back to like the frame grabbers we had that were lunch boxes. We called them frame grabbers,
Fair enough.
and they literally just took a frame and stored it so to be replayed. So I don't know if there's a more. I think there's probably a more technical term for that these days, but I don't know what it is.
That's all right.
Yeah.
What is the best lens for good depth of field and crisp close-ups?
Good depth of field and crisp close-ups. Um, that's more of a question for a DP or a camera assistant.
Yeah.
I know what I like to use for like a crazy depth of field, and being closer up with like a crazy type, which is to say, oh, I know. What I need to know about this question is, does great depth of field mean I can see more clearly? Or does great depth of field mean you get a nice portrait look where where the subject is in focus and everything else is out of focus? Because for
Uh,
me, great
yeah.
depth of field is very shallow, very small, and
I mean,
it's like,
that's what I assumed as well. So maybe is there a lens specifically used for that? Like, I don't know, 50 millimeter or something like that?
yeah, one direction or the other is better for it. And I think I want to say narrower lenses. Well, there's good math on this. This is again like a photography textbook thing that I'm gonna really embarrass myself if I try to answer. But I will say, like, I like a much shallower depth of field. I like running it. It's more to do with your f-stop. I mean, I like running it somewhere between, um, uh, you know, two, what is it, 2.8 and 5.6. But whereas like you're gonna get better, what the lens can do is probably gonna be found somewhere between like 8 and 16.
Okay.
Um, and Yeah, tough question to answer. That's a lot more in-depth optics question. That there's literally books written about that can give you a wide set of answers for.
Fair enough. I really like this next question because it's something that I feel like everybody faces at some point with a character, and it's about blinking. I personally have like spent a lot of time trying to find a natural blink.
Mm,
Lately, I've been shooting on the thing I'm working on right now. I'm shooting 24 frames per second, and I found that an open eye, one mid eye, and then like 5 frames of close, and then mid eye and then open eye looks pretty good. But I don't know, like what are your rules of thumb? How long should they blink for? How often should a character blink to make it look natural?
sure. I think nobody's gonna like the answer to my question, but it depends on the character. Like if you
I mean, that's a good point.
is your character languid? Is it a tortoise? Like is your tortoise just kind of sleepily blinking? Is your hair just very rapid and blinking all the time? And every time it shifts its eyes from left to right, it blinks. I do find that you um, blink more when you change what you're looking at. So if a character is looking from left to right, I will often use a blink to hide um,
I do
moving
that
an eye
too.
from left to right. Yeah, like it's all whatever's necessary. And so you can add character to a character depending how fast you blink the eyes. Um, Sometimes it's limited to what you what you've created. I mean, like if you're sculpting your own eyelids, you can end up with as many as you want. If
Yeah.
I'm on a set, I've got like a quarter lid that is on all the time to give the character just a generally sort of sleepy look or a tired look, and that's their general expression. If you walk around with your eyes wide open for the whole shot, like there's not personality there. So there tends to be some sort of relaxed eyelid, and then if that eye is going to close, um, if it's rapidly looking from somewhere and blinking several times, like I'll go straight to a closed lid, just because that's all it needs. If I'm on twos, ones is going to be a different thing where maybe you do want like a half lid, or maybe it makes more sense to go from a quarter open to three-quarters closed to completely closed. That gives you kind of like a settle into closed, and then you want to snap it open. So you go back to three-quarters and then all the way to wide, to like look at something or be shocked about something. I think um, there's an efficiency to blinks. You don't have to use them all the time. You just start to get a sense of when it feels best to blink. If you're that character and you're staring at that thing, when do you blink? When does it feel natural?
Yeah.
And you start internalizing this stuff, and as a character animator, you are acting. So spend the time on set, like make the broad motions with your arms and look around with your head and find when it feels natural for you to blink. And be that character, be that tortoise, be that hare for a moment, and just experience what it's like and observe your behavior. I think that's the best sort of thing to go away to go
Well,
about it.
I was counting your blinks and you blinked 18 times while explaining that. So if your character's on a podcast explaining how to blink, I'm just kidding. Well, part of me doesn't like that answer because I want you to just say, oh, you should blink every so many frames. But at the other side, that's a really good answer is you should always be telling a story no matter what. And if your character is tired or excited or staring, it depends, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Or
And
lying,
or yeah, exactly.
like
Like, yeah, that's not even a outward personality. Like you can't even, yeah, it's body language, right? So if you're doing that, it's always gonna tell a better story and just look better. So that's another thing we didn't discuss yet: frames per second or ones and twos and things like that. if you're starting out, what should you know about how often you should be doing a frame per second?
I would say start on twos. I mean, ones are incredible. They are also inherently taxing. And when we're working on commercials or things with a short timeline, we try as much as we can just for schedule's sake. Like working on ones takes twice the amount of time that working on twos does. There are
And sorry,
things,
you're referring to ones and twos on 24 frames per second. So
right,
ones would be 24 frames per second, and twos would essentially be 12 frames per second.
right. And often we'll be physically shooting 2 frames when we're working on twos, because that way we have the option if we really need to. We really need to get that nice subtle blink and make sure it's captured. We will like throw a one in there just to help. Don't be afraid. There's no hard, fast set rules. Don't be afraid to go from twos and into ones for a minute for a fast motion, and then ease it out into twos. And you can use that. You can adjust timing as you go, but I think in the interest of making it easy on yourself as you're getting started, work on twos just to, it's like sketching, right? Like you don't need to immediately go in and paint the Mona Lisa. Like get some sketches in there, see what things look like when they get put next to each other. And I would say start on twos, and then you can refine into ones. And ones are a thing that I have always been pretty afraid of, but in the last couple of years I've found them very useful. I'm terrified of working on a project on ones. It's like it's just so intimidating, and everything's so intricately small. And I like efficiency, and I like to make it happen, and I want to get to the end. So I try to I tend to work on twos. But ones are very handy for bullets and stuff like that, as Bill
I'm
Plimpton, if
kind
you've
of the
watched.
opposite. I'm shooting on ones right now, and like just to get a normal like hand wave, it takes the like amount I'm moving the hand per frame is so tiny, but it's so satisfying to see how smooth it
Yeah,
looks afterwards.
the
Um,
results are gorgeous. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
your
but
results are really
it's
good.
so taxing, and I've like have like a shoulder like strain because of it. So I do have a bunch more questions. Maybe I can just shoot through them. A couple more on lighting, which I feel like you answered already. One is about, can you fix hotspots or vignettes in After Effects or afterwards, or do you need to reshoot?
Uh, it's almost easier just to say reshoot. If you don't like it, reshoot it. If you can try to fix it a little bit, but as soon as you get what's past called the knee, whereas the camera is picking up like a white value that's beyond like the sensor, you can't bring that detail back. It's
Yeah.
basically a pure white pixel in this digital age. You can maybe underexpose a little bit. Like when you're shooting, don't be afraid of going just a little bit darker, as long as your blacks still have a range. The trick is finding where nothing in your shot is too hot or overexposed, and nothing in your shot is too underexposed.
Yeah.
Um, because you can still play with that range in compositing, and you can still kind of push or brighten something up in compositing, as long as you have the information there visually. So there's no way to take like white hotspots like back down. There's no way to provide more information there if that information hasn't been shot.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. The next one is, do you have any specific tips on animating on flat tables with clay and paper? I know there's a lot of flat table animation or like on glass.
hmm
Do you have any tips on doing that?
Yeah, look up angle of incidence, get those lights out of the reflection, like get them out of the plane that the camera can see, and then just go generally pretty broad. I think broad is a good solution. And if you're dealing with like multiple planes on like multiple layers of glass, um, don't be afraid to really get those glass layers apart, as long as you can get the camera higher, and use a Narrower lens is going to give you less distortion, and a wider lens is going to make things feel deeper, you know. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, that's a quick summary on that. But yeah, I think broader lights set farther away is very helpful for down shooters.
Nice. What is the best way to make interchangeable faces without a 3D printer? I
Sculpt
know
them.
you can try clay, you can try molds, you can do Sculpey and bake it, you can do paper cutouts. I don't know. What is the most economical way of doing this with still getting a really good effect?
I'm a paper person. Even like layer it or do like to get a little more depth, maybe do the lips on one layer and space that apart from like the teeth and the inside of the mouth if you need a little depth in there. But yes, sculpt it. Don't be afraid of polymer clay. I would use something that ends up being like a hard piece because I kind of am kind of a klutz on set, and I'm not a good sculptor on set. I don't like to use clay on set myself. I'm not a great sculptor, so I like to do all that hard work ahead of time, and that way I don't have to think about sculpting while I'm replacing mouths on a puppet. So I would say, yeah, like a Fimo or Sculpey clay that bakes hard, or anything you can sculpt and then have it be hard. If that means taking a mold off of clay and pouring plastic, do it. I think the easiest thing is going to be like a polymer clay or paper myself. Yeah.
Nice. I actually saw, I think it's called The Kite. It's a short film that's being produced right now, or I think it just finished. But the character is a complete puppet, but then its face is just a stack of papers, which is so interesting because you can just take one off and redraw a face, and it's perfect.
Oh,
So
great.
getting creative too, I guess. The last question I have is, if you're buying an armature, what is the best kind of beginner armature to start with? I know you mentioned kind of making your own out of wire and clay, but is there like an armature you know of, or
Hmm.
just one that you think is a good starter armature?
I don't have a good recommendation. You should find I know, let's just question bomb Rob Shaw is I believe is Sir Rob on Instagram, and just I'm gonna just send you straight to him because he has done a lot of research and got a lot of different armatures that are already made to mix and match and create his own stuff. And I don't know anybody who's bought more armatures and put more mix and matched more armatures than he has. I think he's a great place to start. But also, people have been having a lot of success, I feel, recently with Sticky Bones. That was that Kickstarter that happened a couple years ago that are finally just got delivered maybe a couple months ago, and I'm seeing people really enjoy using them. So if those are now available, I would say look up Sticky Bones. They're not directly just skeletal armatures. They're more of a complete human figure, but they have incredible articulation, and would help you practice character stuff.
I've seen a lot of people animate those on Instagram, and they're and it just looks like a human too. It's great.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I just went through the questions and that's pretty much all of them. So do you have anything else to share? I know we've been talking for like an hour and 40 minutes.
No, that's
I think
fine.
this is the longest
Sorry.
podcast I've done so far.
Oh no. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, if I have any advice, it's just stay curious. Just stay curious and keep exploring. And yes, there are rules, but there are no rules.
I like that. Yeah. Well, Javen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your experience and wisdom and like all these interesting thoughts on physics and whatnot. I don't know if you can hear me like clicky clacketing away on my laptop, but I've been writing everything down. I'm going to include a list of everything you've mentioned in the description of this podcast. So if you're listening, and want to check that out,
Great.
do so. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, if you are still listening and you have questions for Javen or want to check out his work, you can do so by following him on Instagram under the handle Javanable, or by checking out his Vimeo page where you can see his show reel and all of his short films. And just a reminder also that if you're starting out in stop motion and you're looking for a really good armature or rig, you can head over to Mark Spess's website, animateclay.com, and use coupon code AIP to get 10% off any of his bendy armatures or bendy rigs. and even a copy of Stop Motion Pro software. And that is all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye.